In the spring of 1876, in the quiet farmland of Bath County, something happened that no farmer, scientist, or curious mind could ever fully explain. On an otherwise ordinary Friday, the sky above a tiny community called Olympia Springs suddenly unleashed. Not rain, not hail, not snow, but meat. Yes, actual, raw chunks of flesh. For several minutes, an area roughly the size of a small barnyard was pelted with what appeared to be beef. Falling from clear skies in broad daylight, no storms, no birds in sight, and no rational explanation. What came to be known as the Kentucky meat shower remains one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in American history. To appreciate how bizarre this event was, we have to step back into the world of 19th century Kentucky. Bath County in the 1870s was a rural, slow-paced farming region. Families lived off the land, worked the fields, and knew their skies. Weather patterns mattered to them. A coming storm could make or break a season. So, when something unusual happened in the heavens, it wasn't dismissed, it was remembered. At Olympia Springs, people were used to quiet days of tending to cattle, corn, and tobacco. Nobody was prepared for what would come crashing down from above. The first reports of the event came from Mrs. Crouch, a farmer's wife, who was outside making soap on her porch. She looked up when she noticed strange shapes falling. At first, she thought it was snow, but snow in March wasn't unusual in Kentucky. What was unusual was that the flakes weren't white, soft, or cold. They were red. They were sticky. And they weren't flakes at all, they were chunks. According to her account, the sky seemed to open. For a matter of minutes, pieces of flesh, ranging from small shreds to slabs the size of a slice of bread, fell around her property. Imagine yourself in her position, standing on your porch, soap bubbling in the pot, and suddenly, meat begins to fall from above. Not a bird carrying scraps, not hunters tossing leftovers, but a genuine downpour of raw flesh. The ground, the fence posts, even the soap pot itself, were littered with wet, sticky meat. Mrs. Crouch screamed for her husband. By the time he arrived, the yard was covered. What they saw would shock not only their neighbors, but eventually the nation. Word spread quickly. Neighbors came from miles away to see the bizarre event. They gathered around, touching the pieces, sniffing them, holding them up to the sun. One neighbor said the meat was fresh and looked like beef. Others claimed it resembled mutton. A few brave souls even tasted it, chewing the raw flesh to see if they could identify it. Their conclusions? Some said it tasted like lamb. Others said venison. Nobody could agree, but all agreed it was meat, and it was real. Newspaper reports described the shower as covering an area of about 100 by 50 yards. That's nearly half a football field, littered with raw flesh. Some pieces were thin and stringy. Others were thick and fatty. The meat had landed in such a way that it seemed to have fallen vertically, straight down, as if dropped by an unseen hand in the heavens. The sky itself had been clear, with no sign of storms or unusual cloud activity. Newspapers from New York to St. Louis carried the story, often with a mix of fascination and ridicule. The New York Times ran a report dubbing it a meat shower. Readers across the country debated whether it was truth or hoax. Scientists, professors, and skeptics all weighed in, each offering theories, none fully satisfactory. The first explanations were rooted in superstition. Some claimed it was a sign from God, perhaps punishment or warning. Others whispered that it might be witchcraft. Rural communities in the 1800s were not immune to superstition. When the sky rained flesh, it wasn't hard to imagine supernatural explanations. But soon, science tried to step in. Meat were carefully collected, salted, and preserved. Samples were sent to laboratories and universities for study. The most famous investigations came from the Louisville College of Pharmacy and several independent doctors. What they found only deepened the mystery. Microscopic examination revealed the meat was, indeed, animal flesh. Some samples seemed to be lung tissue. Others appeared to be muscle. A few pieces looked like cartilage. The most shocking conclusion was that this wasn't a single type of animal. It seemed to be a mix. Muscle fibers like beef, fatty tissue like lamb, and even lung tissue resembling horse or deer. No single answer fit the puzzle. Scientific explanation came from Dr. L.D. Caston of the Louisville Medical College. He suggested that the meat shower was caused by vultures. These birds of prey are known to regurgitate their meals in mid-flight, especially when startled. If a flock of vultures had been feeding on a carcass and were suddenly disturbed, they might simultaneously vomit their meals while flying overhead. To the people below, it would appear as though the sky itself was raining meat. The vulture theory. While this theory gained traction, not everyone was convinced. First, witnesses reported clear skies with no visible birds. Second, The sheer volume of meat seemed too large for even a large flock of vultures. And finally, the distribution of meat covering such a wide area. Some pieces relatively large made it hard to believe it all came from bird vomit. Critics argued that the theory, though clever, was more of a stretch than a solution. Other explanations surfaced, each stranger than the last. Some thought it might have been pieces of animals swept up into the atmosphere by a whirlwind and then dropped miles away. Others speculated it could have been cosmic meat from another world, falling to Earth like meteorites. A few skeptics claimed it was all a hoax, perhaps locals tossing butcher scraps into the air to trick reporters. But eyewitness consistency made the hoax theory unlikely. Taste tests. Yes, taste tests. Several locals, unable to resist curiosity, fried or boiled small samples of the meat. They reported that it had the flavor of either lamb or venison. This only added to the confusion. Was it livestock? Was it wild game? And if so, how had it fallen from the sky in the middle of a clear day? The Kentucky meat shower became a sensation. Traveling salesmen, reporters, and curious visitors came to Bath County hoping to see the famous meat for themselves. Though most of it spoiled quickly, the story lingered. For years, Olympia Springs was remembered less for its quiet farmland and more for the day the sky rained flesh. For the Crouch family, the event brought both fame and ridicule. They were questioned relentlessly, some accusing them of exaggerating. Farmers joked about the sky's butcher shop, but the ridicule didn't erase the truth. Dozens of eyewitnesses stood by their accounts. The event also cast Bath County into the national spotlight, something the rural community had never experienced. Generations later, historians, scientists, and curious minds still write about it. Even modern researchers revisit the vulture theory, wondering if perhaps a freak incident of synchronized regurgitation could explain it. Yet, even today, no definitive explanation has ever been proven. The event also became symbolic of the era. The late 19th century was a time when science and superstition often collided. America was modernizing, yet rural communities still clung to folklore. The Kentucky meat shower sits perfectly at that intersection, scientists trying to analyze tissue samples under a microscope, while neighbors whispered of omens from the heavens. Though it caused no lasting damage, no one was killed, no property destroyed. The psychological impact was enormous. Imagine living in a world where the skies could unexpectedly rain blood-red flesh. It shook people's sense of order, their trust in nature's predictability. And perhaps that's why the story has never faded. It reminds us of how fragile our understanding of the world really is. To this day, the Kentucky meat shower of 1876 remains one of history's strangest unexplained mysteries. Was it vultures vomiting in unison? Was it wind carrying flesh from some distant slaughter? Or was it something more unearthly? A phenomenon we still cannot comprehend. The people of Bath County never found the answer. But for a few unforgettable minutes in 1876, the skies over Kentucky opened, and the impossible became real. The day it rained, meat still challenges our understanding of nature, reminding us that history is full of events so bizarre, so unbelievable, that even science struggles to explain them.